What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into our 2024 rookie guide that just got released this week. We're really excited about it. So let's dive into it. Let's give you a preview. We're going to be doing previews. We're going to go over big boards. We're going over profiles, how to dive in, and what we look for in these prospects. But Jeff's going to tell you why you should download it right now in the comment section, or not the comment, the description box below.
Yeah, why you should download it. It is the day after the Super Bowl when we are recording the show, which means it is officially the NFL offseason, which in Dynasty leagues is part of rookie season, and it leads off and going into it. And so what we are going to provide with this guide is going to be the deepest look that you're going to get out of the player pool potentially. We really dove in very, very hard, ridiculously far compared to, I believe last year, towards the end of last year, version 3 of the guide, we ended up around maybe 140 some players. We're starting out with 152 players this year. So that gives you an idea of before we even know combine lists, before we even know anything about pre-draft visits or anything like that, this is a great opportunity for you to really familiarize yourself with the players that are available, because right now I'm still seeing people put Torrey Holton and Tez Johnson and whoever else you want to list that is not in this class on their content for some reason. But anyways, that is neither here nor there. Now it's just very, very deep look at who is available, and we start to rank those players out. The other thing, we scouted all these players. We have specific traits we look for. We try to profile them into NFL offenses. We put that level of context into every single player card that we did. And so this is going to give you a great idea on kind of set those eye lines. If you like a specific type of wide receiver or a specific type of running back to build your dynasty squads around, this will help you sort through and be able to identify those players and really give you an idea of where to aim your sights.
Another reason, I think one thing that we take pride in is we do a lot of the work that, maybe not everyone does. Someone might see a consensus list and say, okay, I'm just going to build off of that. We build our own lists as we go. So as you download this guide, you're going to notice some things that don't quite look like what you're seeing in the fantasy industry. And that's just because we explain it. We go through an entire scouting report, strengths, weaknesses, why this player might be ranked lower, why this player might be ranked higher. And I mean, credit to both of these guys. When I was going through the guide, we functioned as area scouts, which we'll talk about here shortly, on the positions this year, so we could hit as many as we possibly could. When I was going through the guide, I was just impressed with, my initial view of some guys that I hadn't watched yet. And reading the scouting reports, I said, oh, well, I'm excited to go in and dive in and rank those players specifically. So I think that's a benefit to have, because there is some level of groupthink in the fantasy community and in fantasy football content in general, that stems from groupthink that's at the NFL level. And so as we're getting eyes on these guys and putting those things into scouting reports, I think it's really beneficial for everyone in their leagues to kind of have some additional context that might not look like everyone else's guide. And I don't say that to say, well, we're not trying to put hot takes out there and things like that. We're doing the work and we're saying, why is this player ranked like this in consensus? And then we're questioning things and we're trying to get to the bottom of everything. I think that's one thing that we pride ourselves in this guide. And I really, really think that it's going to be beneficial in your rookie drafts. And I know some people are drafting into their rookie drafts here soon. Some people like to do it before the NFL draft. You have the most opportunity to get a head start on your league mates. So, Kevin, I think we should probably talk about, you said it's in the description. How else can we find it? Do you know?
You could go to footballguys.com. It's there. I think it is important also to note it's free. Completely free. All you got to do is put your email in. You get a 152-page guide with consensus rankings. The first 2 versions are free. Also, this is not a one-off. We update this as we get more information from the combine. We update this as soon as these guys are drafted. You will have a guide ready for your rookie drafts that Monday-ish, Tuesday of that week. And that's version 3. That is the paid version, because we dive into like what you can expect from these guys. But that's how fast this turnaround is, because we're degenerates and we're crazy. That's just as simple as it. Like, we just get this out. We have long nights to really get that third version to you. But the biggest thing is, you go to Football Guy. I don't know the link off the top of my head. I don't know if Christian has it off the top of his.
Footballguys.com/rookie guide. Well,
perfect. Look at that.
I think it's as simple as that.
God, I wish I paid attention in class. So yeah, that is the key. Like when you download it and you have the guide, and I want to know, it's free for everybody out there, and for people that don't have the time to do it, we do in terms of the prospect breakdowns and stuff. This should just give you an overview. All right, who are these guys coming in? Especially those that don't watch college football. Especially, I know a lot of us, a lot of you don't because you don't have the time to watch two sports in terms of the weekend. Okay, who are these guys? And yeah, there are probably some guys we're going to be wrong on. That's okay. Like, I think the whole part of this is the process. We are area scouts in this where we took a position and then we kind of bounced around a little bit. But the one thing I would say is, like, as we get into the combine, we will have more consensus ranks and really diving into kind of what we all think. So you have the consensus rankings there. But I think, it's a labor of love. It is not easy to do. But the reason why you should download it is because it's free. And there's nothing else out there right now. So go download it. Like, just look at it. You might think we're idiots. That's totally okay. I see the YouTube comments every week. Like, that's fine as well. Like, but at least it maybe gets you thinking about these little things. And I look at this as a football guide, not just a fantasy guide. This is a football guide of the offensive positions in the draft. And we're going to keep adding to that. So any final thoughts here, Jeff, on why people should download it?
I think one of the things that, I give major props to you guys, and I kind of pride myself on as well, is I think it's very difficult to straddle that line between the fantasy world, the draft world, the college fantasy world, and understand that while a player might be very good at the college fantasy world, why that might not translate, or why a player that maybe is at the University of Georgia and is a high level recruit and was, because there was 7 other wide receivers there, didn't put up major numbers, but still has all the traits that you're looking for to profile to an NFL level. And so I think to be able to kind of bridge those gaps. And I think that that's one of the things that, not to toot our own horns, but we're going to toot our own horns, that I think the three of us do very, very well, is to be able to walk in with this knowledge of these players at the college level, having watched them for the year. We're not plugging in right now. We're not plugging in January, just getting first eyes on players. We followed those stories. A guy like Adonai Mitchell, and knowing that how he's performed in big moments. I think that that's something that I'm a big believer that translates to the NFL level. And I think that you're not going to pick that up if you kind of work in that moment and seeing that he's that guy that steps up in that kind of instance. And that's just a one-off scenario. But another guy I like quite a bit, Roman Wilson, is similar, where he's stepped up in big scenarios. And so I think that being able to understand that context and to be able to apply that context, I think is really big.
One other thing. So I think one of my favorite things about Football Guys is that we function as a guide for you guys to all win your fantasy championships. Yes. This guide is a perfect example of that, because you might find a player like Isaiah Davis, for example, that you love, that maybe we haven't ranked as highly, but you see the scouting report and you're like, man, that's my type of running back. I think I'd bet on this guy. Or maybe it's, Dejon Edwards or someone like that. It doesn't have to be a specific player, but maybe you see something in a scouting report that you really like. And so this guide will just give you the information so that you can then make those choices, especially in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds of rookie drafts. And if you're crazy, I know some people that draft 8, 9, 10 rounds. Unfortunately, we don't have IDP in here. I do want to clarify that it is only offensive players, but if you have questions about IDP, hit us up. I'm sure I've watched a few of them, but yeah, you can kind of get your favorite sleepers, even if they're not ranked exactly that way in the guide. And also shout out to the entire team. We're talking about this like, it was just us three. There is a giant team at Football Guys that put this together, that helped us with distribution, with the design of it, everything on the back end, that they don't get the credit when people are talking about this guide. They deserve all of the credit. Maybe not all the credit, but a lot of the credit, because this was a massive team effort from everyone at Football Guys. So just shout out them real quick.
Yeah, and I see a lot of stuff about like pre-rookie content doesn't matter till the draft. I think that's nonsense, because a lot of people are drafting right now. If you're drafting in Dynasty leagues, these rookies are included in these drafts or these picks and where these guys are at. It only took Christian 8 minutes to give me a little side comment about my rankings, but that's all right. It's going to be a long off season. But before we move on, we're going to be diving into the big board. So stick with us. We're going to be diving into the big boards and player profiles. We're going to be talking about that. But take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with any questions, trades, or thoughts on any of the topics that we cover.
Also, be sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty, IDP, salary cap, and basketball content for less than $70 annually. Head to footballguys.com/plans to join today. And that will be how you can get that version 3 of the rookie guide. And then version 3, maybe we can take just a quick moment to let you know of version 2, we do post-combine. And so what we do on version 2 is we add in athletic testing for all the players that it's available for. We really narrow down some of the physical traits, some of the size measurements, those types of things to really give you a very comprehensive picture walking out of the combine. Version 3 is when we are going to dive in post-draft to give you the first look at where players are going to fit within depth charts, where players fit within team schemes. All those types of elements are what we add to that third rookie guide, and really kind of, especially this year's running back class, we're going to be big on talking about the next couple of months. That's going to shuffle so much of the rankings because so many of these running backs are so tightly grouped together once you put them into those team contexts, and that's where a value is really going to land for you.
Yeah. Rare good point by Jeff Bell right there talking about the running backs. But let's get into this. So here is what we look at right now. This is our big board. So those of you watching on YouTube can see it. If you're listening to it on the podcast, you can download it, just listen to it as we go. But we're going to be walking through the big board this early, right? So this early part of it. And as Jeff said, this is just really what I look at with big boards like this early. It's talent based. All right, here's the talent. Here's who we think are the best players. Now, as draft capital comes, as the combine comes, things are going to change a little bit. But this is our consensus big board for just superflex. Now, we're going to go over one quarterback here in a second. But this is our takeaways of where the tiers are at. We've had some conversations already. Like we have neighbors over Drake May in terms of like that kind of in that 105 range. And then he goes all the way to 112, right? And then we go all the way to 412, 4 rounds of superflex consensus big board. February 12th is insane. But that's what we did for you guys. We kind of dived into it. What is your main takeaway from the big board, Christian? Just looking at the big board, how we kind of broke down. No running backs in the first round. That's pretty, common now, consensus. But what is your big takeaway here?
From a large scale perspective, I think it is important context that last year, our big board, the first big board, a lot of the first 6 to 7 to 8 picks stay pretty similar.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the shuffling happens. That version 3 is kind of the big board that you really, really want, because that version 3 big board is going to look different from ADP and consensus and things like that. But main takeaway from this is if you're drafting before the NFL draft and you have a first round pick, you kind of need to avoid the running backs. And if you really need a running back and you want a running back, get back into the second round. I do think that there's a chance that one of those running backs there towards the top of the second round sneaks into the back if he gets a good landing spot. I think we'll see a few running backs on day 2. I don't think that number is very high. We've talked about that a lot on this show, but if if this is your first time watching this show, go back and catch those episodes. But I think that's kind of the main takeaway is that we're going to see a lot of wide receivers coming off the board. These quarterbacks are going to push people down. And then the other one is JJ McCarthy. This isn't common right now to have JJ McCarthy this high in rookie drafts on big boards, and get accustomed to this. There's a lot of buzz that JJ McCarthy is going to be a top 10 pick. So that's why we've hopefully set the bar pretty high in terms of what his ceiling is in rookie drafts. And I'm excited to see where he ends up landing in the NFL draft, but I think he'll remain inside our top 10 here on our big board as we get through version 2 as well.
And if you really look at this at a macro level, this gives you a really good picture about how we kind of value players. Because I look at these running backs, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Trey Benson, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Brooks. These are all players that we're confident can contribute in the passing game. And I think that that's one of the things that when you look at the way we're valuing players together and coming up to that consensus, because you see a lot of people have Braylon Allen as their RB1, or they think that Blake Corum is going to be the Chargers starting running back. And so we definitely lean towards those backs that have 3-down skill sets that can really contribute and be those primary fantasy options. And then some of these other players that might be more role specific naturally fall down our board a little bit more than I think what you might see in some consensus. And it works the same way with wide receivers as well. The way that we kind of value wide receivers that can handle lining up throughout formation, attacking at multiple levels, and really be those players that can handle a lot of volume relative to some other wide receivers that might have some buzz, but might be more specialists.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think like when you're thinking of the running back class is going to be talked about, and no one knows 100% what that running back class is going to look like. The one thing I will say is understanding like what these guys do well in the guide. You're going to read about a lot of what the running backs do. Like, can they be a 3-down guy? All of that, and the other thing too, is like when we talk about capital and we talk about draft capital now, we've talked about it on this show for 3 years almost, I think, where 4th round is not a deal breaker anymore for running back capital. To me, that's day 2. Like, that's the way I look at the 4th round. And in some of these guys in the 5th round are going to fall into some fun landing spots. You're going to get someone that goes to the Chargers in that scheme, the Ravens. Someone's going to go to these spots where you're like, hey, I see that volume and that maybe will be in that mid-second or 3rd round. But overall, like just overall, look at the consensus big board. Things are going to change. Absolutely. Like you're going to look back in this, we're going to be like, but that's the fun in this. I do want to go to the 4th round though, because we're not getting out of here without me asking a question. Jeff, if you had to pick one guy in the 4th round that you really like, that you think can rise in value, that you think maybe has a good combine, who would that be for you in that 4th round?
Malik Washington.
I knew it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm full steam ahead on him. I just think that he's a player that he was held back by team situation a little bit at Northwestern, and he was still the leading receiver there. And then we just see the explosion at Virginia. And I think that he's a player. I talk a lot about what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the wide receivers is players that can, how adaptable are you? How much can I move you throughout formation? Can you attack vertically, which he can? And then the biggest thing is, can you be a volume player that can get the ball, that can create with the ball in his hands, that can work in that short to intermediate areas, that can be a scheme touches player? Like I look at a guy like Tank Dell, for example, that's a player that he can attack vertically, have those big plays, but at the same time, you can get the ball in his hands and allow him to create. And so I think that that's what Malik Washington, and I know Malachi Corley is a player that a lot of people are high on, and the reason I separate them is because I have seen Washington work at different levels in a college game, and I know that Malachi Corley had a very good Senior Bowl, but that was also set up very well for Malachi Corley to have a good Senior Bowl, because he is that type of explosive athlete that if he can get your hand on you one-on-one scenario, defensive backs are going to struggle with that. But when you've got 3 defensive backs on the field and he can't push one guy away and run away from other guys, then I think that there's some more struggles to gather separation there. But I do think that Washington has some of those more natural separation abilities.
I have a bet on Malachi Corley, if I could actually bet this. Most rookie offensive pass interference calls next year, based on what we saw at the Senior Bowl. Guy just loves shoving DBs. Yeah. I would like to pick one as well. Theo Johnson. So both tight ends here, Theo Johnson, Ben Sinnott, in the 4th round. I think those are guys that could work their way into the 3rd round. I think that they will start to get some buzz. I think they might be day 2 picks. I think I have it projected as both of them going in the 3rd round. Very role specific and certainly going to need a path to targets. But I think they both have a skill set that in the barren landscape of tight end, now that obviously changed a little bit this year, and we have a lot of young up and coming tight ends. But I think if you're taking a shot on one of those day 2 potentially tight ends, I think you can do that at the back of the 3rd and feel pretty comfortable with it, because I think both of those guys have a shot to be top 12 guys at some point in their careers. That said, I think us having Tez Walker and Malachi Corley is going to be the thing that stands out to people. And so we do know that that's not normal. We've been lower as a group on both of those guys throughout their processes. So I just want to throw that out there, because that's just kind of been how it's been. And that's how it kind of landed on our big board, which I was personally happy about that's how it landed, that we didn't succumb to the consensus on those 2 players.
Well, I think to be clear too, for everybody, if this is new, if you haven't like read us or, our content or whatever, we really do our stuff separately. Like, we don't do groupthink very much. We'll fall in love with a player every once in a while, like, and we'll fall on our face, right? Zach Evans. But like, for the most part, we do pretty well. Like, hey, this is what I see. And we argue about players all the time. Like, there are guys that we argue about, liking or not liking or whatever the case may be. So this isn't like hot take either. This is how we built it in. And this is where that kind of consensus, and we come up with our own consensus, really. I want to dive into the single quarterback consensus, big book. So there are people out there that play single quarterback still. So like, it's not just superflex, and like, that's why we do also do the single quarterback. I will say this, it's really become apparent in the single quarterback, because I did a mock today on this. There's 4 dudes at the beginning, Nabers, Bowers, Harrison, and probably Ndunze for some. And then there's a big tier of like, when do we take Caleb? So when you're in your drafts, I mean, that is the thing. Like, if you believe Caleb can be a top 8 or 9 quarterback, like, obviously we have him at the 105. So you think that he's probably worth that 105, 106 range, in that range, probably. My big takeaway from that first round is probably is, Troy Franklin over Brian Thomas, which I know a lot of people like Brian Thomas a little bit more out there consensus wise, probably not for us. We were pretty big Troy Franklin fans. But Jaden Daniels too, sitting there at the 108 because of his rushing upside. So one quarterback doesn't change too much. Obviously the value for the one quarterback and Superflex obviously is there, but there is that tier, and you could cut off the tier at 103. If you don't like Ndunze, you don't think he should be in the Bowers, Nabers, and Harrison, it's basically a 3-person draft. And after that, it gets very muddled.
Yeah. I'm personally, especially if you're not a tight end needy team, and I would be comfortable taking Caleb at 103 in single quarterback personally. I know that sounds aggressive for single quarterback, and the quarterback position is, you have a lot of options out there, but I also think that there's QB1 overall range of outcomes for Caleb Williams that could give you a massive advantage. And if you can get that for 12 years on your Dynasty team, it's the same. I think it's the same conversation. This isn't the player comp that's in the guide, first of all, but this is a player comp that you see a lot. But Patrick Mahomes has built-in value because of just how often he is throwing the ball and how consistently he's finishing inside the top 5. I personally, we've talked about this a little bit on the show before. I value him a little lower than some of those other guys that are a little more volatile, but I think Caleb Williams has those ranges of outcomes where he's going to be the number 1 overall pick one way or another here. And, no matter where he goes, I think that he is going to be successful. That's how confident I am in Caleb. So personally, if you want to take him at 103, feel free. I think that's an okay move to make, but I totally get it as our consensus, him being behind those other 2, because those 2 players are also very good.
This might be a conversation for a different time in a different place, but I'm going to have it now anyways. I was looking at point distribution for tight ends last year, and kind of looking at players that, as we all know, that Travis Kelce kind of pulled back to the pack a little bit. And then we obviously had the breakout with Sam Laporta. We have some other tight ends up and coming. And a lot of things that I'm hearing about Brock Bowers are so if you flash back a couple years ago to the Kyle Pitts conversation, and I think that one of the things that is missing in the context of at the Kyle Pitts conversation, you knew that you had an aging Travis Kelce. Then you kind of had Mark Andrews, you had George Kittle, who were kind of there on the fringe. And that was about it that you really felt good about at Dynasty tight end. And that's where Pitts was getting a lot of steam on that. Of basically, there's just not anybody else that you feel great about, and this is a player that has the talent and the skill set to be that number 1 guy, that difference maker like Travis Kelce for a number of years coming up. I'm hearing people fading Brock Bowers because Kyle Pitts didn't hit, which is just strange to me because they're 2 entirely different human beings going into entirely different situations. But beyond that, I do think there's a conversation to be had about potentially fading the value of the tight end position if you're going to have players like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts is still out there, obviously. You're getting some of these guys. David Njoku still has a lot of his prime left. Travis Kelce's pulling back to the pack. You've got Mark Andrews still available. There's just not a lot of differentiation at the tight end position right now. And so having that guy that, so I'm going to start it right now. I took Jake Ferguson very, very late as my tight end 1 because I figured Jake Ferguson is going to give me 85 to 90% of the top type 5 tight ends, and I'm perfectly fine with that at the position, the way that it's structured right now. You need to make that decision on Brock Bowers if he has that capability of being that next Kelsey and raising that ceiling and being that guy that stands out, or if he doesn't. Because if you don't believe that he does, it's hard for me to take him at the 103. And especially talking about single quarterback relative to the value that Caleb Williams can kick off there. And I think that that's a great point that Christian just made.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you have to, as you go into this is what these are for. Like, this is what the guide is for. Giving you ideas, context, hey, decisions you're going to have to make. If you have those rookie picks too right now, can you are you going to move them? You have your veteran pieces there. But overall, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the guy to kind of watch, I'll give him a shout out before we move on to kind of how to view the profiles. Michael Pratt, big Tulane guy, quarterback. Christian's been a fan of Michael Pratt for a long time, sneaking in there in that 4th round. Be on the lookout for guys like that in Superflex 2 and 1 quarterback of those late round picks to take a kind of a flyer on there. But we do want to give you, especially for YouTube, so you can see it, like what we're looking at, what you're looking at when you dive into a profile. We're going to go over Caleb Williams' profile. But first, Christian's going to walk us through how to view the profiles, what everything is. That way you understand kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah. So number one thing that we've got here is, so this page is in the rookie guide. So you can, if you're unsure of, what is 24/7 sports, if you're unplugged from college football, it's a common thing to not know. So what we've done is we've kind of described what each of those things mean with 24/7 sports. So the star ratings, we've got the definition there, the year that they came out, what their position rank was, their composite grade, and what that composite grade means. We've got all of that kind of laid out. If you're watching right now, you can see it on the screen. If I'm not going to read the definition out loud because I want you guys to go download the rookie guide, but it's important to know that we are, kind of helping you through if you're kind of looking and you're saying, man, what is all of this? We've got our position ranks up at the top. So those are going to be just specific to the position. It's pretty big. You can kind of see QB1, QB2. But then we've got our analytics index, which is something that Jay Stein really helped us with on this rookie draft guide. One of those other guys that he operated in the shadows, but he is a massive, massive piece to this rookie guide where he put together a ton of data and put it into this one simple percentage for you. Things that like college dominator, QBR, things that translate to NFL success. And he condensed it into this one specific percentage for you. The higher the percentage, the better the prospect from an analytics perspective. We wanted to bring that to you guys this year because, we talked about our process a little bit, but we're film grinders. You've probably heard us a little bit before, but we watch the film. We look for traits. We look for those types of things, and numbers definitely matter. And there's certainly some, context to that within our profiles, within our scouting reports. But Jay's analytics index really gives you more context on that to show you, okay, for Caleb Williams, for example, his analytics index is nearly 100%, which is by far the highest in the class. Then you look at the scouting report, you see I gushed about Caleb Williams for about, 250 words, whatever that is. I talk about how his weaknesses are barely weaknesses. And you say, okay, I'm really comfortable drafting Caleb Williams this year. And then finally, RAS, relative athletic score. We had this in the guide last year. I want to thank Kentley Platt specifically for we reached out to him to make sure that he was okay with us putting in the rookie draft guide. But what this is this combines all of the NFL scouting combine or pro day metrics into one simple athletic grade. So it's 0 to 10. Higher is better. So I believe Anthony Richardson was a perfect 10 last year from his combine. So as those numbers come in version 2, we're going to make sure we input those into the guide and ensure that you're getting the full context. So the example from last year, Anthony Richardson's a perfect 10. We talked about how maybe some of his passing stats were a little misguiding. They kind of misguided you, and how he showed a lot of those good things on film. And then he comes out as a rookie, can't stay healthy, but averages like 30 fantasy points per game in his first 4 games. And so that relative athletic score probably would have helped you to draft him a little bit higher in your rookie drafts, combined with our rankings, combined with those scouting reports. But this how to use page is really going to guide you through if you kind of get confused looking at the page, because there is a lot on there. We tried to fit as much information to help you guys as we could on every player profile.
I want to make special mention of two things. I see questions about why would a high school recruiting ranking matter, and it does, to be honest. I mean, and I think that when you look at players that go in the first round in particular, but players that go very high in the draft, it is usually players that have very high profiles coming out of high school and strong star ratings there, and that process has come so far from the early 90s. It kind of seemed like if you paid the right person or if you were at the right camp, you were going to get a high star rating and kind of go that way. And if you watch Friday Night Lights, there's some talk about ratings in that and lists in that and everything else in that. Now that's process is very, very dialed in, and it's major business for those recruiting services, and especially 24/7. That's why we rely on 24/7. We believe that they are the best ones in the industry. We rely on their information that they put together, and that's just to give you those ideas. And a lot of what we're trying to accomplish with this first guide is to get players sorted into buckets, because when you kind of have your rookie guide or your rookie draft and the valuation on that, and people talk about draft capital, and what draft capital is that kind of means where a player gets drafted, basically, that kind of portrays to his historic success. What we're trying to do in a lot of this guide, and something that's kind of great out here, you see a round projection. We're trying to get players sorted into the proper buckets to make sure that we have good eye lines on a player. Like last year, I know one of my personal victories was Michael Wilson. That was a player that was not getting any buzz at all at this point of the year. I watched him. I put him up there. He ended up with day 2 draft capital. He had a couple good games, but the situation wasn't the best in Arizona for him. But that's just an example of a player that can really accrue a lot of value relative to where they start in the process. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to hone on this first cut, and to kind of get in there, is get these players sorted out so that you've got the proper eye lines on players that you should actually be looking for on deeper leagues and those deeper picks that you're actually able to make now, relative to players that just maybe they have some buzz, but they have very small chance of actually making it.
Yeah, 100%. And before we get off the YouTube channel, I do want to break down, so you could see one of these scouting reports without kind of the explanations there. You're going to see the rundown, just a quick snippet of that scouting report, strengths, weaknesses. So there's a lot for everybody. Like if you don't want to read a ton because you're a millennial, or I don't know, Gen Z, or I don't know what the younger version is, and you just want the quick hits, that's fine. Here's the rundown. Here's the strengths, weaknesses. Here's their scheme fit. Here's the landing spots. This is what we like about them. But if you want more of that deep dive, the scouting report, what we saw from them, that is included as well. And then on top of that, round projection, where we think they're going to get drafted, and then player comparison, which I think can be fun. I don't think it's perfect. Jeff is much better at player comparison than I am, and Christian. We are both not there. Jeff's watched a lot of football. He's old, so he's seen a lot of guys. So that's part of it. He's got a little uptick there. But that's every card, and we have 152 of these already for you. You can just dive in. Hey, who's in this draft? And for a lot of you guys out there, you can just start plugging these players into your spreadsheets or whatever, and you can start looking at who do you like? What buckets are they in? According to, and the way I look at it too, like Jeff uses buckets. I talk about tiers. Hey, a lot of these running backs in the same tiers. Okay, this guy has these kind of skill set. I think I'd like him more based on my PPR league. Okay, and then just kind of using this as that guide for you. That's why we do it. That's why we created it. And this is all the explanations for why we had it. Now, on the podcast, I know we're going to be talking about other stuff, kind of our process, what we're looking for, talking about the scouting stuff that we do. But any final takeaways before we kind of move on to the next part, Jeff?
I just want to I'm so appreciative of the you guys, the team at Football Guys, Taylor, Dylan, I'm gonna Jake, Keith behind the scenes, Jay Stein. It really means a lot to be able to come together on this and to be able to put this out. And we can't tell you how much work we put into this, but also how much it means to us to be able to create this.
Yeah. And we really, we really hope that you guys are able to use this now and you can become experts by the time your rookie draft comes. So if you want to if you say you're not super into rookie season until closer to the NFL draft, even if you just download this guide, kind of keep it handy, maybe pop in, look at the rundowns really quick and say, okay, I'm just kind of gathering my thoughts a little bit in advance. I'm not really locked in. Like Kevin said, we kind of have that built in for you where you can just roll through the rundowns really quickly. You could probably read all 152 rundowns in like 15 minutes or so. And you can kind of get a head start that way. And then as your rookie drafts come closer, you've got those scouting reports, those strengths and weaknesses and things like that. You're going to have updated rankings. You're going to have updated everything. So we really hope that this is going to help you win your dynasty leagues. We hope this is the guide that can help you do that. Like Kevin said, the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. We're about to head over there, talk a little bit more about our process, how we scouted these out, things like that. Probably talk a little bit more about some players. So if you're enjoying this part of the show, make sure you head to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.